Happy Saturday Deep Dive.
Happy Saturday.
We've got something really special today. Brad over at ACN has, well, he's really delivered this week.
He certainly has.
He sent over this amazing collection, just loads of historical tidbits, all about Fountain Hill.
Yeah, it's like a binder, just cram full of compiled notes, personal stories, little snippets and excerpts.
A real treasure trove. It feels like a journey waiting to happen, just opening it up.
It really does. And as we've been digging into this material, our goal, our mission, sort of, has become pretty clear.
Yeah.
We want to pull out the most interesting, the most insightful stories about Fountain Hill that are hiding in these pages.
Right. Give you, the listener, a real feel for its past and the people who actually built it.
Exactly. A genuine connection.
And honestly, you should prepare for some surprises.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. This isn't just, a list of dates. We're talking about a really long, quite lively history.
Mm-hmm.
You get this palpable sense of community spirit just woven through all these different accounts. It comes through strongly.
And some connections that are genuinely unexpected. Things linking Fountain Hill to, well, much bigger historical moments.
Yeah, some threads you wouldn't predict.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. Where better to start than the name itself, Fountain Hill?
Good place to start. The information we've got seems to strongly point towards a link to another Fountain Hill back in Anson County, North Carolina.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, the thinking is that Isaac Denson, who was one of the really early settlers, arrived maybe around the 1840s.
A key figure.
Absolutely. And apparently quite energetic. He named his new home here in Arkansas after his birthplace back east.
Energetic seems like an understatement. The notes say he actually earned the nickname the Hustler.
Huh. That certainly paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does. And his contributions were more than just settling. He actually served in the War of 1812.
That's right. Pre-Arkansas days.
And here's where it gets really interesting for the local history, I think. When Ashley County was formed in 1848, his house, Isaac Denson's house, was designated as the county's very first courthouse.
That's a huge detail, yeah.
Yeah.
Really marks his home as like the initial center of government for the whole area.
Right.
The documents say both county courts and circuit courts were held right there.
Wow.
And Denson got paid, but not a lot. Something like $5 per session for using his place.
$5. Times have changed.
Just a bit. And there's this great little story in the notes, too, about a lawyer, a Judge Willis.
Okay.
Apparently, during a court session, he got completely distracted watching a woodpecker outside the window. Just lost his train of thought entirely.
Oh, that's brilliant. You can just picture it, can't you? A little moment of real life creeping into the formal proceedings.
Exactly. A wonderfully human moment captured right there in the records.
So, okay, the community's starting. And often, when communities start, there's collaboration, but maybe also a little bit of friendly rivalry.
Oh, for sure. And the documents definitely highlight something like that between two key families, the Watkins and the Densons, especially about where the first church should go.
Right. Isaac Denson, who we just talked about, and Thomas A. Watkins. Seems like they were both pretty influential back then.
Clearly. The Watkins family, they settled north of a place called Flat Creek.
Okay.
And the Densons established themselves south of it.
So a natural dividing line, almost.
Sort of, yeah. And that first church building, a log structure, it ended up being built on a mound sort of halfway between their homes.
Got compromise.
Maybe. But technically, it was on the Watkins side of Flat Creek.
Ah, okay. But that wasn't the end of the story, was it?
Not at all. Because that first church, well, the story goes it burned down, met an unfortunate end by fire.
Oh, dear.
And the next church, that one got rebuilt on the Denson side of the creek, on what people started calling Norris Hill.
Interesting. So the Densons kind of won out in the end, location-wise.
Well, it's a bit more complicated, actually. There seem to be two versions floating around about what happened that first building.
Oh, like what?
One story suggests it was actually dismantled, taken apart, and then a small frame building was put up where the Flat Creek Cemetery is now.
Okay, version 1.
Version 2, this one comes from a Mrs. Allie Watkins Wood, is the one you mentioned. It burned down,
Yeah.
and then was rebuilt as the Norris Hill Church over on the Denson side.
Huh. So we don't know for sure which is true.
Not definitively from these notes. It really shows how history gets passed down, doesn't it? Oral traditions, different memories.
Yeah. And the fact that people apparently still refer to the Across the Creek community even now.
Right. It suggests those early sort of geographical, maybe social distinctions had a lasting impact.
It's fascinating how these small details, these early decisions or disagreements, can echo through time like that.
Absolutely.
Notes also mention that Ashley County officially became, like, a proper governmental entity in 1849.
Hmm.
And at that specific moment, the records show only 2 school teachers living anywhere near Fountain Hill.
That's right. A.D.D. Sims and his wife. They lived nearby, close to her father, Sam Sparks.
Just 2 teachers. It really gives you a sense of how small and new everything was, just starting to build those basic structures, schools, churches.
Exactly. A very young community finding its feet.
Okay, so the community's got its name, it's taking shape, the foundations are there. Let's dig into some of those key institutions that these documents talk about. Starting with the churches, often the real heart of these early settlements, right?
Definitely. And the Flat Creek Baptist Church, which, later became the First Baptist Church of Fountain Hill, that one has a particularly long history, really tied up with those early families, like the Watkins.
The Watkins again?
Yeah, William J. Watkins. He was the son of one of the charter members. And apparently, he was a devoted reader of the Arkansas Gazette. Read it for something like 47 years.
Wow, 47 years. That's dedication.
Isn't it? And he apparently had some pretty strong opinions. Wrote letters about the county's formation and even about something called Clayton's Militia after the Civil War.
Clayton's Militia. That was during Reconstruction, right? A state force.
That's the one. A pretty controversial time and group. His letter sounds quite fiery.
He really did have strong feelings. I saw that bit recounting how he lived in 4 different counties without ever actually moving his house, just because the boundaries kept shifting around him.
Imagine that.
And yeah, his comments on Clayton's Militia, those are powerful, firsthand accounts from a really turbulent period.
Absolutely. And then there's the Fountain Hill Methodist Church. Also has deep roots, founded way back in 1844. The Daniel family seems to have been really important in its early days, particularly a woman named Frances Daniel.
Well, what's her story?
Well, the notes say that after she gained her freedom, she actually willed land to the church. Pretty generous act.
That's incredible, especially given the circumstances, gaining freedom and then giving back like that.
It really is. And connected to that church, there's mention of the Daniel Cemetery.
Ah, okay.
Burials apparently happened there between, get this, 1795 and 1915. A huge span of time.
Wow, 1795. That's really early.
It is. But here's the poignant part. Permanent grave markers were apparently never put up.
Oh, no. So just unmarked graves.
Seems like it. It's quite sobering, isn't it? Thinking about all the lives represented in those spaces, their stories just largely lost.
Yeah, lost to time. That's sad. Okay, moving from the spiritual side to education, the documents talk about schools too.
They do. There was the Gardner School, founded by Will and Ellen Gardner, operated from about 1901 to 1929.
Okay.
It eventually got folded into the main Fountain Hill School District.
Right, and there are these lovely little details, like the school being located just off what's now Highway 425, and mentions of kids playing games there. It gives you a nice little snapshot. Seems like Will Gardner's family valued education even before that formal school, too. His mother homeschooled him.
That comes across. Then, of course, there's the Fountain Hill School itself. Big development there. There's a new brick building in 1930.
Ah, brick. Sounds like an upgrade.
Definitely. And that led to consolidation, bringing in smaller surrounding districts, like Wigley School District in 1931.
Which makes sense. Pooling resources, maybe getting better facilities. That was happening a lot around then, wasn't it?
It was a broader trend, yeah, centralizing things. And it's interesting, the graduating class of 1921, they apparently made a point of saying they were the first class to complete the 11th grade.
Huh. You can sense the pride there, can't you? First ones to hit that milestone.
Definitely a sense of achievement. And it wasn't all just books either. They formed a school improvement association back in 1917.
Oh, yeah. What for?
Simple goal.
Yeah.
Get seats for the auditorium. Practical stuff.
Gotta have somewhere to sit. And there are mentions of other things, too, like Royal Temperance League medal contests.
Right. And those classic community events, box suppers, fundraisers, social gatherings.
Real community hubs.
And you can't forget the sports. The notes talk about the Fountain Hill School football team in the 1930s being really gung-ho.
Gung-ho. Love that description.
Yeah. The picture painted is like makeshift uniforms, probably not much equipment.
Make and do.
Totally.
Yeah.
And apparently they even had girls practicing with them sometimes.
Really? That's quite progressive for the 30s. Shows real community spirit, just getting it done.
It absolutely does. Enthusiasm over resources.
Okay, so churches, schools.
Right.
What about the money? For any town to grow, you need some kind of financial engine. Fountain Hill got its own bank in 1913.
It did. And the documents suggest that was helped along quite a bit by the completion of the A.D. Fountain Hill Railroad. Made things more accessible, brought in business.
Makes sense. connects the town.
Yeah. And a key figure here was E.W. Cap Gates.
Yeah.
He was involved with the Fountain Lumber Company and the railroad.
Ah, the Cap.
He played a big part in organizing what started as the Monticello Hill Bank, which then became the Fountain Hill Bank.
Catch.
The original plans called for a brick building, even had a vault specified. Little quirky detail. The plans showed it facing one way, but the actual building ended up facing east instead.
Huh. Wonder why. Maybe a better view.
Who knows? But we get a good sense of the bank's early days details on the starting capital. Lists of the first stockholders from December 1913.
Right, seeing who had a stake in it early on.
And how ownership changed hands later. It really sounds like the bank's whole rhythm was tied to the farming year.
Yeah, you can imagine. Loans out in the spring for planting.
Exactly. Loan activity clearly peaks then. And then you see it drop off after the fall cotton harvest when people presumably paid back their loans.
Makes total sense.
But what's really fascinating are these coded notes they found on the old ledger sheets.
Coded notes, like secret messages.
Sort of. Like BP, which likely meant bushels of potatoes. Or BC for bales of cotton. Collateral, basically.
Ah, I see. Tracking what the loans were based on.
Precisely. And other codes, too. C's seems to have meant colored, indicating the race of the borrower.
Wow. Okay, that's a stark reminder of the times.
It is a reminder of segregation, but also, interestingly, it shows Black residents were participating in the local economy, taking out loans, even within those constraints.
Right. Part of the system, even if unequally. Any other codes?
There's an intriguing one, SH. The guess is it might stand for Smith Hughes.
Smith Hughes.
Yeah,
That rings a bell. Vocational education.
exactly. A federal act from 1917 funding vocational aid in schools. This code apparently showed up a lot next to loans taken out by a teaching couple.
Some maybe related to their teaching work or agricultural projects at the school.
Possibly. It suggests an early investment in that kind of practical education within the community. It's like decoding a lost language of the town's economy.
It really is. And there's another glimpse of the cashier check register from 1918.
Uh-huh.
Shows all sorts of stuff being bought via mail order. Sears Roebuck, maybe. Often for really small amounts of money.
Gives you such a tangible feel for everyday commerce back then, doesn't it? What
Yeah.
people needed, what things cost.
Totally. Okay, beyond the bank. Communities often have fraternal groups, lodges, that sort of thing. Any mention of those?
Yep. The Masons were present. Fountain Hill Lodge number 135 was chartered pretty early, 1859, but it seems it didn't last long, defunct by 1873.
Ah, wonder why.
Hard to say from this. But later, another one started up. Pyron Lodge number 669, chartered in 1885. That one had a good long run,
How long?
over a century. It only merged with the Hamburg Lodge in 1986.
Wow. That's a long time. Where did they meet?
Early on, apparently in the Woodman of the World building, near the old agricultural building.
Okay. And of course, no town is complete without a way to send and receive mail. The post office.
Essential. And Fountain Hill got its first one quite early, too. September 22, 1846.
1846, that's before the county was even officially formed, wasn't it?
Just. George W. Worthington was the first postmaster.
And the postmasters changed over time, I assume?
Oh, yeah. The documents list several changes. And there's an interesting little side note about a place called Blissville being renamed Jerome.
Blissville to Jerome, why'd it change?
Well, the story here is that there was confusion with Blytheville, another Arkansas town.
Ah, I can see that happening.
And apparently there was a desire to name the office after a local man, Jerome Moley.
Jerome Molly. We'll hear that name again, won't
We will indeed. But it's worth noting, there's a researcher mentioned, Rebecca Dearman Husky.
Right.
Her research apparently suggests slightly different dates for when Blissville was established and when it became Jerome. Just another example of how historical details can sometimes be a bit fuzzy.
Absolutely. Different sources, different memories. Okay, so these institutions, churches, schools, bank, post office, lodges, they really built the framework for life in Fountain Hill.
Backbone of the community.
Now let's pivot a bit and look at some of the specific people and significant events that these documents bring to life.
Yeah, the human stories.
Exactly. And one that really stands out is the story of George Husky.
Ah, yes. Very poignant.
He was involved in the Civil War, wasn't he?
He was. Tragically, he drowned in Flat Creek while he was carrying a message during the war.
Drowned carrying a message. Awful.
And he was buried there at Fountain Hill in the Flat Creek Cemetery. There's a letter included from that same researcher, Rebecca Dearman Husky.
His descendant.
Seems likely, given the name. Her letter adds these really touching details about his family, his wife, Sarah Brantley, their children. it makes it so much more real, seeing the personal impact of these huge historical events.
It really does. Brings it right down to the human level. And then, speaking of major historical events, there's this really unexpected connection to World War II.
The Japanese-American internment.
Yeah, it turns out the Jerome Relocation Center, one of the big camps in Arkansas, was actually named after that Fountain Hill man we just mentioned, Jerome Molley.
Wow. I didn't realize that connection.
Very
Named
cool.
after him specifically.
That's what the notes say. And it goes further. Apparently, some folks from Fountain Hill were involved in resettlement projects even before the Jerome camp was set up.
Really? Like government projects?
Yeah. It seems so. And there's another link. 2 teachers from the Fountain Hill schools. Minnie Bell Gardner McCain and Helen Gardner Deckelman, they had connections to the Dice Colony. That was another New Deal project, right? Helping tenant farmers. Johnny Cash's family lived there for a while.
That's the one. So it's just, it's a stark reminder, isn't it, how even a place that might seem kind of remote, like Fountain Hill, can be deeply intertwined with these major national, even international events and policies.
Yeah, no community is truly isolated. History finds its way in. We also get glimpses of some really colorful local characters through these papers.
Oh, yeah.
Holt C. Hobbs, known as the Candyman.
The Candyman. Tell me more.
Sounds like quite the entrepreneur. Ran a successful candy business right out of his car.
Out of his car. That's fantastic.
Isn't it? He also served in the Navy during World War II, and people remembered him for being incredibly hospitable and generous. Just sounds like a real local legend.
You can picture him driving around selling sweets. Part of the fabric of the town.
Totally. And then there are these firsthand accounts from a Fountain Hill soldier who fought for the Confederacy.
Ah, the Civil War experience again.
Yeah. The notes suggest it might be Isaac Denson again, based on a mention of his cousin being killed at the Battle of Antietam.
Okay, that would make sense.
And it's powerful stuff, details about the battles he was in, the conditions, and his eventual return home after the surrender at Appomattox.
Those personal narratives are just invaluable, aren't they?
Yeah,
Bringing the reality of that conflict right onto the page.
absolutely. A perspective you just don't get from textbooks. Then there's another surprising link. Governor John Sparks of Nevada.
Governor of Nevada, what's the connection?
Apparently he lived in Fountain Hill at some point.
No kidding. A Fountain Hill resident becomes governor of Nevada.
Crazy, right? The notes describe him as having this really colorful life as a cattleman before getting into politics. And there's even a touching little anecdote about his final moments. It's just fascinating to uncover these threads, people from this small Arkansas town who went on to make their mark elsewhere.
It really broadens the picture, doesn't it? Connects Fountain Hill to a much wider map.
Definitely. And jumping forward a bit to more recent times, the documents mention plans for Ashley County's 150th birthday celebration back on January 1st, 1999.
Okay, sesquicentennial. Did they have a big party?
Seems like it. And get this, the celebration apparently included a rather explosive local tradition.
Oh,
Shooting anvils and cannons.
shooting anvils. How does that even work?
I have no idea, but apparently it's a thing. Definitely paints a picture of a community that knows how to make some noise for a celebration.
For sure. A unique local custom, you might say.
Indeed. Okay, lastly, the documents spend some time on the local cemeteries, which, as we know, hold so many stories themselves, even if they're hard to read sometimes.
Very true. Silent witnesses.
The Flat Creek Cemetery is discussed quite a bit, mentions a deed transfer from Georgia Pacific in 1976.
Okay, relatively recent ownership clarification.
Yeah. But it sounds like actually cataloging all the graves there has been really difficult.
Why is that? Age.
Mostly, yeah. Age, weather damage to the markers, and lots of temporary markers just disappearing over time.
Ah, the temporary ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, those rarely last.
So the notes even list specific people like Charlie C. Deal, Kate Deal, Effie Deal, someone named H.R. Dina, or maybe Dyher Hodson, George Husky, who we talked about, Emil Hordkuss, Janie Marie, people whose exact grave locations are now uncertain, or even William George Ross, whose grave might actually be under a road now.
Under a road. Oh,
Yeah.
that stuff. It really highlights how fragile these records are, how easily things can be lost or obscured.
It really underscores the importance of trying to preserve these places, doesn't it? And the
Yeah.
memories they hold.
Absolutely.
There's also a mention of the black section of the Norris Hill Cemetery still having recent burials, which is good continuity there. But also sad note about older graves near the First Baptist Church that have just been lost entirely over the years.
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, how history can be erased if we're not careful, and how important the preservation work that does happen really is.
So true. Okay, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into Fountain Hill's history, based on Brad's amazing binder, what are the main things that stick out to you?
Well, Fountain Hill really comes across as a community with deep roots,
Yeah.
a long history marked by real resilience, I think.
Yeah, resilience is a good word.
You see the spirit and the perseverance of the people in how those key institutions, the churches, the schools, the bank, were established and how they endured.
Right, they weren't just buildings, they were lifelines.
Exactly. And the individual stories we touched on,
Mm.
from Isaac Denson, the hustler, to the candy man, Holt Hobbs, the soldier sharing his Civil War experience,
Mhm.
and then those unexpected connections like to the Jerome Camp or the governor of Nevada,
Mm.
it all weaves together into this really rich, compelling story.
It absolutely does. And it feels so clear, doesn't it, that we've only just scratched the surface with this deep dive.
Oh, definitely. That binder Brad sent, I bet there are countless more stories, more details just waiting in those pages.
No doubt. Which kind of leads to a final thought, maybe for you, our listener, to chew on.
Okay.
Considering everything we've talked about today, setting up the town, the tough times people live through, those surprising links to bigger history, what single thing, what thread do you think best captures the real spirit of Fountain Hill?
That's a good question to ponder. What defines a place like that?
Yeah. It definitely makes you appreciate the effort involved in preserving local history, doesn't it? All those unique stories that make a community what it is.
It really does. We owe Brad a huge thank you for sharing this incredible resource.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Brad. And thank you, our listener, for joining us on this really fascinating deep dive into the history of Fountain Hill.